I guess new buyers agents or buyers themselves get caught up in FOMO. A lot of out-of-town buyers agents or newer agents in particular tend to rely too heavily on the short-term data. And yes, you can get a quick win, 1 to 3 years window, but you can buy property that looks good today, but the real test will still be right in 5, 10, 15 years down the track.
Our motto is buy without regrets, and so
if you can buy a property that will serve you for 10 years as opposed to 3 years, that will serve you well. It's something
buying a great property today, that's not just what it's about. It's also getting something that could be ripe for improvement when the time is right for that investor or for the next buyer.
You think about, right, lifestyle, what's important to you? How do you get to work? What do you need for your family? What amenities like parks and shops? Then you look at the budget.
Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. I'm a mortgage broker since 2013. And in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Australia's leading buyers agents, ones with decades of experience, have the local insider knowledge on the street, and can really help you with your buying process, no matter whether you're a first home buyer, upgrader, investor. In this podcast, you'll get access to Australia's leading buyers agents' minds every week on a Thursday. What's the word on the street? Welcome to Street Secrets. Thank you for joining us today. We're heading over to the other side of the country today, all the way to Perth. Ray Chua's in the house. He's got a business called Buyers Advocate at Perth. He's been a buyer's agent in the Perth market for a long time. I've known him for a long time as well. And thanks for joining us today, Ray.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, Chris.
Maybe give us a bit of an understanding how long you've been in the buyer's agency world, what were you doing prior, what got you to become a buyer's agent, and why you've stuck in it for so long.
Well, sure. Look, I've actually just celebrated my 20th year in real estate, actually. And the first 3 years was actually in sales. And the last 17 has been buyer's advocacy. So it's been quite a journey. And before that, I graduated with honours in engineering, and I travelled in for a while after I worked a couple of years and realised that I wanted to go down this entrepreneurial path. And I was really fascinated and have always been fascinated by systems and optimization, and whether that's engineering or businesses or property. So early on, when I started studying business shares and property, started going to seminars and learning from others. And I applied those lessons in my own buying journey. And that hands-on experience has really cemented my passion for property, and it's given me those takeaways that I still use today. And I spent over 15 years with another buyer's agency learning from great colleagues. And honestly, that's really the best apprenticeship that I could ask for, because you just learn a lot on the job. And a couple of years ago, I launched Buyers Advocate Perth. And that's because I wanted to do things my way, put people first rather than sales targets, and to be known to have the highest standards in every aspect of the job. Over the years, I've also seen the cycles in Perth close up with the mining boom, the long plateau. And throughout those flat years, I became really fluent in the value add strategies. I spent a lot of time talking to councils, studying zoning and understanding those growth opportunities. But what's interesting now is realizing that development isn't always a prerequisite for growth. And sometimes it's the fundamentals that delivers those best results.
It's interesting. Did you grow up in Perth?
Yes, I grew up in Perth.
Yes, you grew up in Perth. So you've known it for a long time, right? Not just moved there in recent years or something like that. And I think that also helps, right? To really understand how a city sort of evolves. Your engineering background is an interesting one. I always like to unpack that a little bit, because I think buyers agents, a lot of people come from different backgrounds. And I do think, obviously there's a natural skill set that gives you, and that analytical brain, I do think is really valuable in property, because you are looking at a lot of data points and understanding how that all interlinks together. Do you think that's one of the benefits that provides you, or is there any other benefits you can think of?
Yeah, the transferable skills. Engineering was all about systems and making subsystems work together and creating that optimized outcome. So that's very similar to when buying property. You're merging all the different disciplines, the art of understanding people and markets, and then the science of analyzing data and risk. So I often describe it part art, part science, and the art is reading the market and the psychology. And then the science is the analysis, the combining those fundamental drivers, long-term drivers, with the short-term technical indicators. That talks to the price pressure. So that engineering mindset, the discipline, the preciseness, solutions oriented, that's really how it shaped my business today.
So what made you stay in it for so long? I mean, you could always go and do a career change. Everyone does 6 career changes in their lifetime. Why do you think you stuck around?
It's definitely the impact that good advice can have on people's lives. That's the big one, and you really get huge satisfaction. I just got an email actually saying I bought them something for 950 5 years ago, it's just sold for 1.5. So that kind of email really, puts a smile on my face. And it is definitely one of the biggest financial decisions people make, and it can really set them up or hold them back. So I've seen both sides over my 20 years in real estate, people who bought strategically and those who made those rush decisions and then they really regretted it. So that drives me to be a better buyer's agent, help people do the right move and have confidence and without the pressure and no guesswork. So look, I enjoy that human connection too. Yes, the hunt's fun, I love the hunt, but I love seeing the clients light up at the end when it all comes together, whether it's walking to their new home or settling on that investment that's going to set them up for the future. Yeah, it's really incredible and rewarding to know that someone's bought really well and just buying the right property and giving that guidance that makes a difference.
When you spoke about a client story there, where are some of the things that you've, just by doing it for 20 years, Ray 15 years ago would probably have made that mistake. Ray of today, maybe not. Like, what's some of the learnings of just doing the job for a long, long time you're getting better at? And particularly by knowing the Perth market pre this recent boom and the real tough times that probably happened in the 2010s over there. So what's some of the things you've learned?
Look, the strategies change. Obviously, like I mentioned, during the cooler periods, it's had value. And during this kind of period, it's more a discerning buying. But really, it's the pattern recognition, isn't it? So doing it for so long, after inspecting thousands of homes, watching them perform or not perform over the decades, you get the clues that others might miss. So 10 years ago, I might have focused more on the property itself. And now I look much deeper into the context, for example, the street or the neighbours and the way the block sits and what's happening behind the fence and that kind of stuff, whether there's development next door. And so, in Perth, I've really learned to pay close attention to the local stuff, the limestone retaining, which often hides drainage and structural issues, the orientation of older homes because they weren't designed for today's energy efficiency expectations, and then the telltale signs of poor renovations. When you go through, you can tell when something's had an extension or poor renovations, the lower ceilings, for example, and a roof that's been patched over, that kind of stuff that can hide deeper problems. So look, it's really taught me to look for the long-term signals, not just the glossy finishes. So probably the biggest change is knowing what not to buy, because back then you're quite optimistic about what you can fix and all that. But now I know what's worth improving and what a long-term liability is. So hopefully it gives you a good sense.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a tough market to work in, right? The Perth market had a crazy boom in the, 2.6 to 2.8? I haven't got the numbers in front of 2.4 to 2.7 or something. It doubled in 3 years or something. And it had a really long, painful sort of down period, which, as acting as a buyer's agent, both for home buyers and investors, it sounds like there was a lot of, we need to manufacture a bit of growth here. We need to buy good land and look to add value to it through renovation or development, etc. So what has that taught you versus just a buy and hold strategy? It does bring a little bit of a different artillery to your offer.
Yeah, definitely. So it has, like I said, during the prolonged flat period, we couldn't just wait. So it was all about manufacturing equity. That's through renovations. So identifying a good candidate, but also understanding opportunities where people can manufacture, turning properties from 1 to 2. And there were a lot of little nuances in the planning code that allowed for that, but also there was rezoning opportunities. So it's funny, they don't advertise. It's all in the meeting council minutes, so you have to really trawl through those. And so I've got that skill to look for those. But like I was trying to say before, now I truly believe you don't need development potential for a property to grow. And so that's actually something, especially in this kind of market, it's probably you're paying for something you might not need. And it's limiting yourself if you're asking a property to do too much as well.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I think that it does when you're looking at property. It's like when I've on buyer's agents from a building background, just the ability to assess what's possible because you had that sort of development renovation sort of experience there. I think it's because in a hot market or a market moving, people want to buy houses, but they find to buy the renovated house. And sometimes they do need to look at the ugly ducklings, I guess, to consider that. It's just sometimes slower for them to actually understand what's possible. So I think you'd obviously be adding some value there. I mean, when you're in the market now, obviously Perth market's done really hot. You've had a lot of investment buyers agents pop up that you probably never heard of before. And when you look at protecting your clients for a slower period in Perth, how does the understanding what the locals want in down markets change the way that you approach it, you believe?
Yeah, exactly. So right now I see a lot of, I guess, new buyers agents or buyers themselves get caught up in FOMO, chase the headlines. And when the media starts naming some suburbs, they think they've found the shortcut, but it doesn't work like that. So the real growth comes from understanding what the drivers are and not just where it's recently grown, that kind of stuff. So a lot of out-of-town buyers agents or newer agents in particular tend to rely too heavily on the short-term data. And yes, you can get a quick win, 1 to 3 years window, but those SoCo hotspots, they do plateau quite fast as well. So we've seen it play out in places like Armadale, Gosnells, even Baldivis. These suburbs have surged when the tide rises, but now they're facing a bit of an oversupply of investor stock, and it's definitely a less diversified demand out that way. And the other big mistake is underestimating due diligence, skipping over the proper checks and things. So these can make or break a deal. So we definitely look beyond the data, combining that on-the-ground insight to what locals value and how the community is evolving, because you can buy property that looks good today, but the real test is will it still be right in 5, 10, 15 years down the track.
In the last few years, I've seen a bit of a boom in prices. I mean, obviously that's because a lot of catch up, right? It became very affordable as a city compared to the multiple of incomes. And I had a handbrake on, and obviously a lot of upgraders have entered the market on top of investors and interstate migration, etc., or people moving back from overseas to Perth. But what do you think the properties have done really well over that period? Because it's what the locals want, right? The upgraded market was obviously driving a lot of that. What do you think really helped those properties really take off that the Perth locals really wanted?
Look, that comes back to amenity and lifestyle, I feel. People aren't just buying houses, it's really that community and the way of living. So some of the suburbs that we specialize in is definitely micro markets, and each suburb performs quite differently. Each area performs differently, should I say, and it comes down to that walkability and the vibe. So it's definitely the being close to the local village type of feeling, or the walk to the beach. So that lifestyle is really what people are after. So where I'm a bit more cautious is where it's more car dependent, and yeah, it might be the same postcode, but if you're on a busy cut through or too far from the cafe or surrounded by inconsistent housing, for example, that usually lags. So yeah, the homes that say truly special are the ones that nail the fundamentals: walkability, community feel, good school zones, and that effortless lifestyle and convenience. And that's the ones that people always compete.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you find, though, that a lot of buyers agents coming in the last few years just haven't probably understood the Perth way of living? Is there a way that Perth people think about things and they really desire more than what they want on the East Coast?
Look, there's probably the common one is proximity to the city. People from the East always ask me, look, I want to stay within 15 k's from the city. But being close to the city, that's just one driver of growth. Probably the beach is more of a draw card in Perth. We've got the pristine beaches up and down the coast. So it's okay to be a bit further from the city if you're close to the coast, for example. So that's a common one that we distinguish. Why would you rather go east 15 k's rather than 23 k's up the northern coast, for example? So it's a little bit of a mindset shift. I guess Perth people love water. Also, we're not sort of Manhattanized. We're not like Sydney where we're not used to apartment living, is what I'm trying to say. So when we go public holidays, we go away and get out for a drive first, a bit further afield. So we're not city dwellers as such. So just understanding the way of life, what's important. We want a bit of space, privacy, and that whole way outdoors isn't really our culture.
And how's that sort of shifted over the last, say, 5 years? I mean, buyers have had to make compromises and move to different parts of the city. What's some of the areas that have really changed over that 5 years, but they haven't really had that same long-term fundamentals? Is it more the east or the southeast or parts of Perth that have performed really well in recent times? But if you go back to pre-boom, they weren't the most desirable parts of, or wasn't their people's most preferable part?
I would just say just the pricing definitely drives people to look at the next suburb along. And so that bridesmaids type of suburb, just a little bit further up the coast or down the coast or down that freeway. And before there were areas where it wasn't fully built out yet, but now it is getting more and more fully built. So over time, these areas do change, but you don't want to go too far out. But just say the next suburb out is worthy of considering, because these areas slightly more affordable if you're in that certain price range, and it's still worthy of investment when you get the ripple effect.
So you've been obviously in the market for 20 odd years. How have you seen that help you from an agent point of view? Agents would be loving the time right now, even in this hot market the last few years. How's that been prevalent and your experience helped you as a buyer's agent?
The best deals often come from collaboration, not confrontation. So I've spent, like you said, nearly 2 decades building trust and rapport with the local agents. So they know I'm not here to play games. I'm here to put deals together, and that works for everyone. And so because of that, I do get quite a few calls before a property hits the market. We also stay on top of mind, of course, and that way we're in the loop, and they'll give us a fair shot at the deal because they know that my buyers are serious and qualified and they've been well advised. So look, selling agents, working with an established buyer's agent, I think it definitely saves stress and time, and they'll know that the process is going to run smoothly, communication will be professional, and the deal's far more likely to reach that settlement without drama. So that's probably all the benefits.
Yeah, I don't like to talk too much around other operators in the industry, so I wouldn't want to. But I do find in the Perth market, it's one of been that they're probably number one hotspot over the last 5 years, particularly for investment-focused buyers agents. And as if I was a buyer's agent like yourself in the Perth market, you would have, who's got a lot of experience, would have just, I can't believe they're doing that. I can't believe they're buying there. Can you highlight where you've felt a bit uneasy with particularly East Coast buyers agents coming into the Perth market hot, spending their East Coast clients' money, and some of the mistakes you think they've been making just over the last few years?
Yeah, definitely. Look, even within that 10K radius, it does look, people on paper, it looks like it's cheap, under 750 within 10Ks of a city when the medians are 895. So it does look like a bargain, but it's usually a reason for that. And it's definitely, there's a few pockets that are close to the city that look good, but the yields are strong. But when you dig deeper into the demographics and the type of buyer demand, it is a different story. So over the years, we've also looked at these areas, especially the ones with some rezoning opportunity, but they just don't stack up in terms of attracting the aspirational owner-occupier that really underpins that long-term growth. So for me, I've always preferred to buy in areas where people want to move to rather than they're moving out of it. It's that emotional decision. People want to feel proud of their home. And when you target that more affluent cohort, that's the segment that's going to really drive growth over the next decade. And you've got to think about who wants to live here. It's not just what's cheap. So even within popular suburbs, sometimes they do get it correct in terms of suburb, but it's what that local knowledge that really counts. So often I see the interstate buyers agents or newer buyers agents come in and they apply their own city's logic, assuming something's close to train lines or within 10Ks of the city must be great, or a classic, that fringe community location in their city did well. So this shit city should do well as well in Perth, the classic Rockingham type of area. But Perth doesn't always work like that. It's the locals value what they value is really different. And if the local market doesn't see a suburb as desirable, the demand just isn't sustainable. So I'll just touch on that Rockingham Baldivis area again. If you've got the big AUKUS project, billions of dollars of spending, new jobs, and it's all positive. But on the other side of the coin is land supply. So you just have to zoom in on Google Earth, Google Maps to see how much development land there is, all the yellow sand. And yeah, it's just if you add to that the higher proportion of mortgage-built households, and those areas can become definitely more volatile when interest rates rise. And then you've got the newer estates, think of Piara Mortars or Brabham. They're really popular with, I guess, a certain community because the family or friends of networks have bought there, and it's got this good school zones, good demand, which is great from lifestyle. But from an investment perspective, you're competing with a lot of ongoing land supply, new builds, and that limited scarcity really makes it hard for the area to outperform long term. So yeah, just because it looks great on paper or everyone knows that that is buying there, doesn't mean it's the right call. And we'll always focus on that aspirational factor and the areas that tend to hold their own during every cycle.
I do like that line you said there, Ray. Like, I want to buy suburbs that people want to move to, not from. And I do think it's really important personally. I think what you're trying to buy is in areas where people are kind of having their dream forever home and they really want to put in roots and stay there longer. And then when they are in those markets, they don't rush to leave. And I do think that those suburbs have a lower turnover rate. They become tightly held. And that also then increases its value because people are living in, the community is stronger, people are renovating. And I think it's just an easy way way to think about it for buyers. You know, are people moving there because it's cheap or because it's just affordable for now, but ultimately want to move? And you find there's some suburbs that naturally when prices hit a certain point, people will bail because it's like, actually, this is a lot of money for me. I need that. I'd rather take that money off the table. And I think you've highlighted that some of the challenges in that Rockingham sort of pocket, right? Not only is it new supply, but you've also got a lot of, are you seeing in that market, just out of curiosity, more than anything right now, I don't want it to be too topical, this podcast, more about, but as a market, are you seeing where it's been solely driven by a lot of investors, not so much the local owner-occupier demand? Once that investor market starts to cool off, you start to see it unwind a little bit. Have you already seen a little bit of that?
Look, it's overcooked. That's probably the way I'd put it. The market's still running hot, of course, in Perth, but there's definitely more supply, more people trying to get out now. So more oversupply. You can start seeing it starting to slow. And yeah, we're just very cautious of having that one sort of type of buyer. So we want that multi-layered demand.
Yeah.
So the golden rule, which I tell my clients, is buy where people want to live, not where they have to live.
So let's say we go for those suburbs, which are the sort of where people really want to be. They're wanting to stay in and they're desiring the aspirational. And you're right, it sounds like it's Perth are willing to go a bit further away from the city as long as it's got a bit better access to water. You mentioned rat runs there and the busier pockets and etc. But what are some of the other things that, unless you really knew the Perth market, I mean, aspect something that, you know, how does that affect things? What other things do you think that people in Perth really value that you know because you've been in the market for a long time?
I would say that, yeah, it's really the lifestyle, I would say. It's the amenities and the community feel. So it's again back to that. If you think like a renter, at the end of the day, if you're an investor, you're buying, you want the same sort of livability for a renter. It's also, if you could buy in a suburb, where would you rather be? So it's that livability and closest to amenities that you're actually going to use. And a big one is school zones. So that's a huge driver. So being on a top school zone, you can easily add 6 figures in value. So it's really that convenience and connection that we're really focused on. And then the practical things, like you said, the backyard orientation, just letting the light in through winter or a higher sun in summer. And so flat block and usable block. So good floor plan. These are things that we always prioritize. And the locals know what to avoid, main roads, awkward layouts, and they'll definitely pay more for a home that feels right. So it's probably not just a postcode anymore. It's livability, lifestyle, and longevity.
Right. Obviously, I've been a buyer's agent for a long time. There's lots of value add for clients that maybe they don't understand. And so when through your experience when clients have engaged you, sometimes they think the value is X, but when you get to the end of it, the value is really Y and they weren't expecting that. So what's some of the things where the value you added was not what they expected and some of the things that you add the most value in?
Yeah, great. Look, I can think of an example actually that really captures that. So we were helping a client a couple of months ago only. They were looking for their own home. And like many buyers in this market, they're feeling the pressure and a little bit worried that they missed the boat, tempted to stretch beyond their comfort zone to get something. So we looked at 2 neighboring suburbs. One was a little more affordable and had a ceiling on the long-term value, but the other one was more desirable with long-term drivers and better lifestyle fundamentals. And then a home came up in the less desirable suburb and we were in the mix to buy it, and until another buyer came along, and then it was a subject sale more than 100,000 above where we even saw value. So my client, being a little bit keen, they really wanted to match it, and emotionally they just wanted to secure something. But that's where I really stepped in to refocus their strategy, and I advised against chasing that one because that property at that price, it just simply didn't make sense. And instead, I pointed them to another home in that better suburb next door that had more character, better street, more upside. It needed a bit more work, but I knew that any money that they put into it, the improvements would really add the real value, whereas the other property had a ceiling price and less upside potential. And then when it even came to negotiations for that better property or the better suburb, I had to hold them back from jumping into right to the top of their budget because I had a good read on the market. I knew what the selling agent was positioned. And at the end, they secured that superior home for a fair price. And now they're absolutely loving it there. And later they told me how grateful they were that they had that steady voice guiding them and keeping them grounded when emotions were high. So since then, they've referred several clients our way. And that's what we mean by buying strategically rather than using the emotions. And it's not about getting that deal done. It's about helping them buy confidently, making that well-informed decision that can last longer.
Oh, I love that, Ray. What you're playing there is a real true trusted advisor role for your client. Easy to just go ahead with what they like and what they feel, but it's sometimes those difficult conversations in challenging their thinking, being that sounding board, exposing them to an alternative property, the benefits, re-educating them, and then you're right, once they were committed to that, just holding them back rather than just going gung-ho and really trying to make sure they still get it for a good deal. And I think, you only can do that if you've got that market knowledge and also not the emotional attached to the decision. It's so bloody emotional buying property, and you think you're in control of it, but you're not. It's the brain's guiding your decisions unconsciously, and that can see as a huge value. Obviously, it's been a great chat today, Ray. We've worked with you lots of times over the years, and we love what you do. And so if you are looking to buy in the Perth market, you're in safe hands with Ray, and all the links are in the show notes. And thanks so much for the chat.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you got lots of value out of it. If you'd like to speak to our guest today, there's links in the show notes on how you can get in contact. And if you're buying your first home, upgrading, renovating, or need any finance related queries, obviously we'd love to help. There's links in the show notes to us as a mortgage broker, and we look forward to next week's episode.